So this video follows on with the story about Milgram and why psychology didn't really warm to what he did. So in the previous video, I talked about how Milgram's work was less popular than the work of Adorno, and I left you with that mention of other work that actually seemed much like Milgram's, such as Gustave Le Bon's The Crowd. But I said it wasn't. The Crowd was published in 1895, and it argued that otherwise decent people could act cruelly in a crowd. So yes, the argument Milgram was making was not new, because that was the same sort of argument, except it wasn't. Milgram was saying something very different. What was different was, for Le Bon, the crowd was the place where panic replaced authority. It was a place where people stopped behaving rationally. They stopped thinking, and bad things then happened because of the systems of authority breaking down. It gave an explanation for evil being the absence of thought and an absence of authority structures. Sigmund Freud's work became popular at that time too, because it also fed into this idea that the crowds were driven by irrational desires, and Freud's project was to help individuals control their individual irrational desires to help bring and maintain order to society. Milgram's studies turned those ideas on their head. It obliterated the idea that humanity was fully on the side of rational order, while inhumanity was fully confined to its occasional breakdowns. Milgram showed that our social relationships, once rationalized and technically perfected, hold the capacity for the expression of the most extreme forms of inhumanity. The Holocaust was not caused by an absence of authority and control. It was caused by a well-thought-out technical system of authority and control. Milgram's work helps us to understand the success of improvements in the technology of the Holocaust, in particular his finding on the role of social distance. During the early days of the Nazi Holocaust, the victims were brought in front of guns and killed at point-blank range, but it was difficult, exceedingly difficult, for the shooters to overlook the connection between shooting and killing. It caused the shooter mental anguish, and it was proving very dangerous to the morale of the soldiers. So other murder techniques were sought to avoid causing such mental anguish. First, they developed the gas vans at the Kelmo camp in Poland. These were sealed vans where people were put in and were then gassed by feeding a pipe from the engine's exhaust into the van. They used these initially to kill people diagnosed with mental illness, and then used them to kill Jewish people. But they couldn't kill large numbers of people all at once, just a vanful at a time. So then they developed the gas chambers, large buildings where people were gassed en masse. And here the role of the killer was reduced to that of the sanitation officer, who was only asked to empty chemicals through an aperture in the roof of a building, the interior of which they never saw. The technical administrative success of the Holocaust was due in part to the social distancing of the unsightly or moral repelling outcomes for the soldiers' actions. And Zygmunt Bauman sums this up like this: one of the most remarkable features of the bureaucratic system of authority is the shrinking probability that the moral oddity of one's actions will ever be discovered, and once discovered, made into a painful moral dilemma. Milgram's studies explained how it was possible for a pilot to release the atomic bomb over Hiroshima. And today it shows us how it's possible for people to kill drones on kill missions. It's the invisibility of victims which is the key factor. And it's this project of the individual concept of self that encourages that process of separating the self from other, to sever the bonds of responsibility that people feel towards each other. And Bauman takes the explanation further. He writes about the moralization of technology. Here, inside the bureaucratic system of authority, morality is tied to how well you've done the job, not on how moral the job is. And as Milgram puts it, the subordinate person feels shame or pride depending on how adequately he has performed the actions called for by authority. Superego shifts from an evaluation of the goodness or badness of the acts to an assessment of how well or poorly one is functioning in the authority system. Now let's bring this home and make it more personal to you. Are you more worried that you've written a technically bad assignment, one that was badly formatted, had poor structure, didn't answer the question, didn't cite the correct number of references, didn't use the APA style of formatting? Are you more worried about that than about writing an assignment that contains morally bad material, that promotes arguments that could cause social harm, that could hurt people? Do you think about whether your assignment is good or bad in technical terms or moral terms? If you're a student on the unit, have a look at the Q&A forum on our Moodle site. Ironically, that forum might already have answered that question for you when you see the types of questions that the class has been asking me in relation to the assignments. Now, let's get back to that concept of social distance. Social distance was created under the Nazis through the construction of ghetto camps and then concentration camps. People were physically removed from sight. The argument for you to consider is whether we're still using a version of that. The camps are gone, though we still have ghettos in some places, but maybe we've developed an even more sophisticated technology, one that constructs walls that you can't see and can't touch, but are impregnable, and methods of killing where the bullets are invisible. If this idea intrigues you, watch the film by Cathy McCormack, a social activist who worked on social justice issues with poor people in Glasgow. She was an extraordinary woman who I admired very much and miss very much. I'll put the link up to her video on Moodle for you and put it in the description box on YouTube. Those invisible walls could be the social categories we place people into, categories that label them as biologically different and inferior, labeling them as damaged in some way or another, and labels them as not like us, maybe even less human than us. And the bullets are the social policies that lead to people in those groups to become starved of social support and social power. And mainstream psychology, for most of its history, has been a key profession that might have helped develop and maintain those labels by creating more and more categories to place people into through its technologies of measuring and categorizing human attributes and behaviors. Our profession has been very busy developing the technologies that help to break the bonds of moral responsibility that people feel for one another by creating walls that divide people from one another. That's the argument I'd like you to think about. Now, I want you to turn to the question as to whether psychologists might be the bad guys in all of this.
Hans?
Have courage, my friend.
Yeah. Hans, I've just noticed something.
These communists are all cowards.
Have you looked at our caps recently?
Our caps?
The badges on our caps. Have you looked at them?
What? No. A bit?
They've got skulls on them. Have you noticed that our caps have actually got little pictures of skulls on them?
I don't,
Hans, are we the baddies?
What I'm asking is, have we become the bad guys because we've failed to sufficiently account for the political and cultural context of what we do? Are we the witless subjects obeying someone else's authority, the teacher deceived by the authority figure? We'll be thinking about that some more, and some other things, in the weeks that are remaining on this unit. So, that was Stanley Milgram. And that's his presence on our unit. So thank you, Stanley. Next week, it's time for us to make some space for Jordan Peterson. And we'll look at what he said about such things as race and gender. So till then, ta-da. I hit the microphone with my glasses. What an idiot.